Hello and welcome back to Speed Demon Painting. In today's videos we're looking at the latest release for the Imperium called the Interceptor, which was released for Armoured Clash. Now this model was sent to me for review by Warcradle Studios, but I do play this game extensively and I've been expanding my Germans quite a bit, as you can see in the background. These models are individually packed, and when we opened up the box there are two major components that are in here straight away. The first one is a set of flight stems, the see-through flight stems, of which you will only need a single one of them. I usually go for the longest that you can find. You will also have a small pamphlet found in here which has a QR code that leads you to the website where you can find the build instructions, not that it is overly complicated for this model, and you will also find a plastic base in there that will take the flight stem so your model appears to be hovering above the surface of the playing area. The other thingy is the bag of resin parts here that I'm opening up, and inside of it we'll find two sprues. The first one holding the wings. This is the underside of the wings. You do have to be a bit careful that you connect them to the right way onto the fuselage, and yeah, not too many sprue gates on them. There's hardly any mold lines and flashing on mine. They are a bit shiny, which means that they've used ample release agent when making these, but yeah, seems like a fairly straightforward cleanup. These wings are of course going to have to be glued onto the other parts of the model, which is the second sprue. Only two parts on this one. This one came undone slightly, which is not abnormal during transportation. And yeah, it has the main body of the aircraft and then the wing on the tail end. And as you can see, it's only 4 parts in grand total. Easy peasy to put together. Now this video isn't just a review of the aircraft. I'm also doing a few side-by-side comparisons with the other flyers in the background, but it also serves as a painting guide in the second half for how I went about painting my Germans in that typical Feldherrgrau that they had sort of later in World War I. With summer vacation having started, it means that I finally have a bit more time to do some painting and some more videos, so if you're interested in Armoured Clash or Dystopian Wars, make sure that you subscribe to the channel for those future videos coming up. Now in the background I've already shown you a few size comparisons compared to the Union aircraft and the sort of weird one from the Enlightened, and this is how they stack up against the one from the Empire and the one from the Crown. Compared to the tanks, these aircraft are significantly larger, which is sort of in line with what aircraft should be like compared to the size of tanks. And yeah, compared to some of the Imperium tanks, these flyers definitely are on the larger end of the scale. Compared to the Lucifer Walkers, these definitely stand out as being quite a bit taller than your average tanks, but in terms of wingspan, yeah, this flyer clearly wins out. Speaking of, I've put my walkers on square bases, mostly to help with stability, but also to help during gameplay, so you can make out the fire arcs better. And I actually think that it adds quite a bit to the model, especially once the bases are actually painted and finished. Now, onto the paint guide of these models. Everything starts off with a simple black primer on all of the different vehicles, but I'm going to give this black primer an all-over coat of this one, which is dark green camo from Vallejo Model Color, which is their sort of historical range. And on top of this, I will be applying a layer of German uniform for sort of the mid-tones, and all of that gets highlighted using two different colors. Green-gray is going to create a bit of a spot highlights in certain areas, where the edge highlighting will be done with this one, which is light green-gray. These are all from Vallejo Model Color. They make an absolutely brilliant line for historic paints. After the dark green camo is applied, which you can see here, it's time to decide where you're going to do some of the volumetric highlights. Now, one of the easiest ways to do this is of course with an airbrush and just doing a zenithal highlight on top of them, but after that you're going to have to, or want to, decide where you place your highlights. And for my tanks, I try to sort of keep the highlights at the top, but not just give it a flat zenithal all over. I'm sort of blending it out towards the front and the back, so sort of that dark green remains in the middle, so it's a bit more visually interesting. And when it comes to the sides of the tank, I actually try to keep my highlights more towards the bottom edge of the tracks, so you sort of have a nice dark contrast compared to the much lighter top, which adds to a bit more visual interest on the model, which is difficult to get at this small scale. When it comes to the aircraft, I'm sort of starting with a highlight down the center of the model and then fading it out towards lighter zones near the wingtips. So it sort of gives you a bit more interest across the model. The bottom part of it will actually remain darker compared to the top part to also add that illusion of more highlighting, even though you will rarely see the bottom part of your aircraft. When it's all said and done, I've applied this with the airbrush. This is roughly what we're looking at. It's quite stark compared to the finished model, but that just leaves a bit more room for additional filtering on top of it. Now, if you don't have an airbrush, don't be sad. You can actually use some stippling and a dry brush to create a very similar effect. I've already got an old video up about that as well. Now, before I go on to dry brushing and other things, I will be adding a black coat to some select panels just to break up that pattern and to make the model a bit more visually distinctive. I'm also adding a couple of black areas to some parts and the canopy of the airplane just to break up that massively green-grey pattern. After some accent colors with the black are applied, this is what we end up with. Now, it is sorely lacking in edge highlights, and I will be taking care of that, but before we do, I'm going to apply a first step of weathering by stippling on a bit of charred brown across the models, usually in places where you'd expect a bit of damage to occur. So I'm talking like at the bottom near the tracks, the parts where you can imagine soldiers would be walking on with their boots, so next to the fuselage of the aircraft, and maybe at the front of the wings, but not so much near the back end of it, otherwise it's going to look a bit too shot up for an aircraft. And after all of that is done, I can finally hit it with that dry brush of the light green-grey, which acts as a perfect highlight for both the black areas and now, as you can see, the final product is quite a bit more brown, and that's because I'm applying some streaking grime from AK Interactive, which is specifically designed for Panzer Grey, but works just as well, I have found, on this Feldherr Grey as well. It's basically applied all across the model and then taken off with a makeup sponge, and even though it is pretty difficult for me to capture on the camera, I will try to show it to you regardless. Now, these paints are not water-based, they are white spirit-based, or mineral spirits, depending on where in the world you're from. That does mean that it's perhaps not the best to use if you're a small child, but if you're an adult, you should be able to do this with the correct safety precautions. Now, the whole model ends up looking brown once that filter is applied. So it's very simple to, once it has dried for about half an hour, go over it with the makeup sponge. And streaking grime is formulated in such a way that it will actually leave small streaks. As you can see from the sponge, small amounts of it are coming off, but because it is a sponge, it will leave some of that deposited in the lower areas, which sort of mimics the sort of buildup of grime you get on tanks. Now, the first pass of removing it is very roughly done with this makeup sponge, and I'm not using any mineral spirits in this sponge because I'm really just trying to get a bit of a smooth transition that way. These enamel paints are a bit more coarse. You do not want to be too rough with your sponge or you'll be rubbing off some of the dry brushed highlights from the earlier stage. But yeah, it's definitely not rocket science. You just go along the whole model until you've removed an amount that makes you happy. And as you can see, these enamels sort of act as a filter across the entire model, and it does knock back those excessive highlights that we've built up earlier quite a bit. We are going to take some of that highlighting back though by going in with a brush that has just been filled with some mineral spirits, which is very hard to capture on camera, but I just take some neat mineral spirits here and then go over some selected areas like the tips of this armor panel, if you will, and scraping off that filter. Now, when you're doing so, make sure that you sort of deposit some of that filter elsewhere, or keep depositing it in the cracks by moving your brush into the recesses. And if it gets a bit too much, you can always just rub some off on your hands. Mineral spirits aren't good for breathing in, but they won't cause too much skin damage. It is of course better to wear a glove when doing this, but sadly ran out of it, and in the interest of of just getting the video done. I went with my hands in this case. Similarly, you can see me reactivating the pigments and pushing them back into the recesses where you'd expect that buildup of grime. And if you notice that you've got quite a bit of that enamel filter on there, you can sort of push it back and forth between different zones to get a result that you like. Now, it does take a fair bit longer for these mineral spirits to dry up compared to water-based products, but you can always speed it up a bit with a hairdryer should you so desire. It does dry up quite matte, so this is what we end up with. No varnishes have been applied whatsoever, and you can actually call it quits at this stage, if you ask me. These are perfectly ready for the tabletop. The next stages are just me picking out a lot of details, but if you're going to be honest, that basically triples the amount of time you have to spend on your models. So if you're just happy with where your model is at now, just stop and deploy them on the table and be happy with it. I am, however, picking out quite a bit of details, like around the shields, and for that I'll be using some of the red, burnt red and some flat red. I'll also be picking out some of the electrical elements using electric blue and shading this with Terran turquoise from Games Workshop this time around, and adding some highlights with this electric blue to sort of get that electro arc feel that the Germans are known for in this game. I've also used these exact same colours to sort of mimic the appearance of glass for this canopy. That did take a while. I think I took almost half an hour doing this, and there's no two ways about it. This is all about brush control and trying to get some smooth blends using these colours, which is something that you can learn with experience. I also picked out the different emblems and shields all across the model, and I'm not kidding when I say that all of this definitely triples your work time on the models, because these are some very tiny details. After all of the details with the non-metallic paints are finished, I give the whole model a matte varnish to sort of unify the finish before moving on to the next step, which are the metallics. For the metallics, I use some dark brown ones called this Tiny Tin and some bronze to pick up some selective details across the model. Now, this bronze is a colour that I shade with some of the old Agrax Earthshade gloss coat, I think it was. Now, that does tend to dry very glossy, but it doesn't matter because in the end of it, everything, all the metallics, are covered in the new Games Workshop Gnome Oil, which has this fun little satin finish to it. So it doesn't matter what colour it is. It can be this chainmail, which can be highlighted with some silver. All of that gets that new Gnome Oil finish. And there we have it. That was the end of this video. If you thought it was useful and learned something, make sure that you liked the video, and like I said before, subscribe to the channel if you want to see any of the future videos. I do hope to see you in my next one, and until then, bye!